My name is Carol, I'm 68 years old, and my daughter-in-law tried to steal my retirement home right out from under me. Before I tell you about how I ended up with a sheriff's deputy on my porch, and her in tears, let me know where you're watching from in the comments. I stood there just behind the sheer curtains of my living room window, my heart beating a slow, steady rhythm in my chest. Out on the gravel driveway, the one I'd paid for with my own two hands, a U-Haul truck was grumbling, its reverse lights blinking like two angry red eyes. My son David got out of the passenger side, looking smaller than I'd ever seen him. And then from the driver's side came Brenda. She walked up to my front door like she was walking into her own, a confident little smirk playing on her lips. She didn't knock. Of course she didn't knock. She pulled a key from her pocket, one with a bright pink plastic cover, and slid it into the brand new deadbolt. I watched her turn it. Once. Nothing. A flicker of confusion crossed her face. She pulled it out, looked at it as if the key itself had betrayed her, and jammed it in again, harder this time, her whole body leaning into it as if sheer willpower could make the lock bend to her. It didn't. The door held firm. The smirk was gone now, replaced by a mask of pure, ugly frustration. As I watched the color drain from her face, my mind shot back 3 weeks. To the day this whole nightmare began. It started, as so many disasters do, with a simple cup of coffee and a breathtakingly arrogant announcement. They'd shown up unannounced that Saturday morning. I was happy to see them, or at least I tried to be. The smell of fresh coffee and cinnamon was in the air. I just pulled a tray of warm biscuits from the oven. I was trying to make things nice, you know? A real family visit. David gave me a quick, awkward hug, but Brenda swept past me like a queen entering her court. She walked through my small lakeside cottage, the cottage I'd saved for 45 years as a nurse to buy, her eyes scanning everything. She wasn't admiring it, she was assessing it, sizing it up. "This upstairs bedroom is perfect," she declared, her voice echoing in the quiet house. She didn't ask. She stated, "My mom Martha will love it. Her back isn't what it used to be, so she'll need the larger space." I just stood there, the coffee pot still in my hand, and that's when I saw it. Dangling from her fingers, glinting in the morning light, was a key to my house. A key I had never given her. "Where?" I started, my voice dangerously calm. "Did you get that key, Brenda?" She waved a dismissive hand. "Oh, I made a copy last month when we were house-sitting. Just in case. For emergencies." I looked over at my son David. My boy. The one whose college fund I'd built by working double shifts until my feet swelled and my back ached. The one whose first car I'd bought by putting off fixing my own leaky roof. He wouldn't meet my eyes. He was suddenly fascinated by the wood grain on the floor, rubbing the back of his neck like he always did when he was uncomfortable. He was letting her do this. He was a willing participant in the invasion of my life. My blood ran cold. It felt like a punch to the gut, but I kept my face smooth. I refused to give her the satisfaction of seeing me crumble. Brenda continued, oblivious. "And David and I will take the smaller guest room for now. It'll be a little tight, but we'll manage until we can build an extension out back. For now. Until." The words hung in the air, thick and suffocating. This wasn't a visit. This was a hostile takeover. They had sat in their own home and drawn up plans for my future, for my inheritance, without even the courtesy of a phone call. They weren't asking for my help. They were informing me of my new living arrangements. They looked at me waiting. Not asking but waiting for my surrender. For me to just roll over and accept it, the way I had accepted so many other things for the sake of keeping the peace. I took a slow breath, my hand steady as I reached for the coffee pot. I looked from Brenda's smug face to my own son's averted gaze, and I opened my mouth to speak. But Brenda cut me off before I could form a single word. "Oh, don't worry, Carol," she said, her voice dripping with a sweetness so fake it could give you a toothache. "We've thought of everything. We'll cover the cost of moving Mom's things. We're not asking you for a dime." She looked at me then, a wide, expectant smile on her face, as if she had just offered me the gift of a lifetime instead of announcing a home invasion. I just stared at her, the coffee pot feeling impossibly heavy in my hand. It was the audacity of it. The sheer, unmitigated gall. She wasn't just suggesting it. She was telling me how it was going to be, as if my opinion was nothing more than a minor procedural detail to be steamrolled over. I finally set the pot down on the counter with a soft clink. I turned to my son. "David," I said, my voice quiet but firm. "What is this?" He finally looked up, but his eyes darted away almost immediately. "Mom, it's a good plan. It makes sense. Brenda's mom, Martha. She's all alone in that big house in Florida. And you're all alone here. It's practical. We can all look after each other." "Look after me?" I repeated, and I could hear the ice forming in my own voice. "I have been looking after myself and you for the better part of 40 years, David. When did I suddenly become someone who needs to be looked after?" Brenda jumped in again, her voice like a shield for my son. "It's not like that, Carol. It's about family. Being together. My mom has been so lonely since Dad passed. And this house is just so perfect for her. That downstairs bedroom gets the afternoon sun she loves." She was talking about my reading room, the little space I had designed specifically for myself, with a comfy armchair and a lamp, where I planned to spend my retirement reading all the books I never had time for. She spoke of it as if it were already her mother's. I felt a hot flash crawl up my neck. "And about that key," I said, turning my gaze back to the piece of metal in her hand. "It looks so alien there, so wrong. You made a copy without asking me?" "It wasn't a big deal," Brenda said with a shrug, finally dropping the key into her purse with a dismissive jingle. "I meant to tell you. It just slipped my mind. You know how busy things get." Slipped her mind. The violation of my privacy, the total disregard for my home as my own personal space, had just slipped her mind. I looked at the purse where my key was now hidden. A piece of my security held captive by this woman. "So the plan," I said, forcing myself to stay calm to play the game, "is that Martha sells her house in Florida and moves in here? With me." "Exactly." Brenda beamed. "We've already got a realtor looking at her place. And don't you worry about a thing. We'll handle the logistics. In fact, we've already started forwarding some of her important mail here, just to get the ball rolling and make the change of address official. It'll make the transition so much smoother." I froze. My blood turned to ice in my veins. Forwarding her mail? To my address? That wasn't just an assumption, that was an action. A deliberate, calculated step to establish residency in my home without my consent. It was a move on a chessboard I didn't even know I was playing. They weren't just planning an invasion. They were laying the legal groundwork for it. David must have seen the look on my face because he finally spoke up, his voice placating. "Mom, we were going to tell you. Today. That's why we came. We wanted to talk it all through. But I knew he was lying. They hadn't come to talk. They had come to inform. To deliver the terms of my surrender." I looked at the two of them, standing there in my sun-drenched kitchen, my son and his wife, and I didn't see family. I saw two strangers who had looked at my life's work, my sanctuary, and saw nothing but a convenient solution to their own problems. They saw an asset to be managed, an elderly woman to be handled, and I knew with a certainty that chilled me to the bone, that saying no right then and there wouldn't be the end of it. It would only be the beginning of a war. But what I didn't know was how dirty they were willing to play to win. They stood there expecting me to argue, maybe to cry. But I did neither. I just picked up the coffee pot, poured 3 cups, and slid one in front of each of them. A lifetime of putting others' comfort before my own is a hard habit to break. As they chattered on about how wonderful it would all be, my mind drifted away from the kitchen, back through the years, through a lifetime of sacrifice that had seemingly been forgotten. I thought of David when he was 10. His father had only been gone a year, and the grief was still a raw, open wound in our little house. He came home from school one day with a permission slip for a class trip to Washington, D.C. His eyes were shining. He talked nonstop about seeing the Lincoln Memorial, about maybe even seeing snow for the first time. Then he showed me the cost. It was a number that might as well have been $1 million. It was 2 weeks of groceries. It was the new tires I desperately needed for my old beat-up sedan. It was an impossible sum. That night, after he went to bed, I sat at the kitchen table under the single buzzing light, the permission slip in one hand and my late husband's watch in the other. It was a beautiful gold timepiece he'd received for 20 years of service at the plant. On the back it was engraved, "To Frank. My love, my life. Carol." It was the only thing of real value I had left of him. The next day I walked into a pawn shop for the first time in my life. The shame was a physical weight pressing down on my shoulders. I felt the owner's eyes on me, sizing me up. I laid the watch on the glass counter, the gold gleaming under the fluorescent lights. The man picked it up, barely glanced at the inscription, and named a price that was a fraction of what it was worth. It was robbery, but it was enough. It was exactly enough for the trip, with a little left over for a new coat for David. I took the cash, my hand trembling, and walked out, leaving a piece of my heart behind on that glass counter. David went on his trip. He saw the snow. He never knew what it cost. He just knew his mom made it happen. That was the pattern of my life. Every choice, every sacrifice was a quiet transaction he never saw. When he wanted to go to college, a good state university with a tuition that made me dizzy, I didn't hesitate. I sold off my husband's beloved coin collection, the one he'd spent every Sunday polishing. I took on extra shifts in the ER, coming home long after David was asleep and leaving before he woke up. I became a ghost in my own home, a silent engine funding his future. His college fund was built on exhaustion and cheap casserole dinners. His diploma was paid for with my youth. I never resented it. Not for a moment. He was my son, my everything. All I ever wanted was for him to have the chance as my husband, and I never did. When he graduated, I cried tears of pure joy. I thought we did it. I thought that maybe, just maybe, he understood the weight of it all. But then he brought Brenda home. And slowly, my son began to disappear, replaced by this hollowed-out version who nodded along to everything she said. They talked about their future, their plans for a promotion, their need for a bigger house, a second car. They spoke of money constantly, yet they seemed to think it grew on trees. They never once asked if I needed anything, if I was okay. Sitting there in my kitchen, listening to them carve up my home like a Thanksgiving turkey, the full weight of it all crashed down on me. All those years of sacrifice, the watch, the coins, the endless shifts, they weren't just forgotten. They were irrelevant. They were the invisible foundation of a life my son now took completely for granted. They had looked at my peaceful retirement, the one single thing I had finally done for myself, and saw it as just one more resource to be consumed. And as I looked at David, avoiding my gaze, I realized the terrible truth. I hadn't just lost a watch or a coin collection. I had lost my son. He had cashed in my love and my sacrifice years ago, and now, he and his wife were back to collect the last remaining asset, me. I just sat there, smiling a tight, polite smile while my world tilted on its axis. Brenda, fueled by my lack of immediate resistance, took it as a green light. Over the next week, the subtle invasion escalated into a full-blown campaign. She'd pop by unannounced, her phone in hand, taking pictures and videos. "I'm just sending these to Mom so she can get a feel for the place," she'd say brightly, walking through my bedroom, commenting on the closet space. "We'll need to clear most of this out for her things, of course." She started talking about my possessions as if they were temporary inconveniences. "This old armchair," she said one afternoon, patting the worn fabric of my favorite reading chair. "We could probably sell this online. Get a nice modern recliner in here for Martha. Something with lumbar support." She wasn't asking. She was planning. The final straw, the one that broke through my polite facade and ignited a cold, hard rage deep inside me, arrived in my mailbox on a Tuesday. It was a plain white envelope, the kind that usually holds junk mail. But this one had the official seal of the Social Security Administration on it. My heart gave a little lurch. I thought perhaps it was something about my own benefits. But when I looked closer, my breath caught in my throat. The name on the envelope, printed clearly above my address, was not Carol Peters. It was Martha Jennings. I stood there by my little wooden mailbox, the birds chirping in the maple trees, the lake glittering in the distance, and the world went silent. It was one thing to talk about forwarding mail. It was another thing entirely to see it. To hold a piece of official, government correspondence in my hand, addressed to another person at my home. This was real. This was happening. I walked back inside, the letter feeling like it was burning a hole in my hand. I didn't open it. I just laid it on the kitchen counter. A white flag from an enemy I hadn't even agreed to fight. I drove to the post office that afternoon, my knuckles white on the steering wheel. I was calm on the outside, but inside a storm was brewing. I waited in line, my heart pounding a frantic rhythm against my ribs. When I finally got to the counter, I explained the situation to the clerk, a woman with tired eyes and a name tag that read Gladys. I tried to keep my voice even professional. I seem to have received some mail for a Martha Jennings at my address, I said, sliding the envelope under the plexiglass. I believe there's been a mistake. Gladys typed my address into her computer, her brow furrowed in concentration. She clicked a few times, her lips pursed. No mistake, ma'am, she said without looking up. According to our system, a permanent change of address was filed online for Martha Jennings a week ago. All her first-class mail is being rerouted from a Florida address to yours. Online. I asked, my voice barely a whisper. But that would require my authorization, wouldn't it? As the current resident. She finally looked at me, her expression a mixture of pity and bureaucratic indifference. The system just requires the new address to be verified. It asks if the person filing is the resident or an authorized agent. Someone checked the box for authorized agent. And who was that? Who was the agent? I pressed, my voice rising slightly. She shook her head. I can't give you that information, ma'am. Privacy regulations. All I can tell you is that the request was submitted electronically, and a valid credit card was used for the $1 verification fee. My mind reeled. A credit card. Brenda. It had to be. She had lied to my face, not just about a key but about this. She had gone behind my back and used the labyrinthine rules of the Postal Service to start legally tethering her mother to my home. She had clicked a box, paid $1, and declared herself an authorized agent of my life. I felt a wave of nausea. This wasn't just about disrespect anymore. This was fraud. She was trying to create a paper trail, a legal justification for what she was about to do. I drove home in a daze, the quiet hum of the engine doing nothing to drown out the screaming in my head. They weren't just trying to move in. They were trying to erase me from my own home. The discovery at the post office changed everything. The game had new rules now, and I was dangerously behind. I knew I couldn't confront them directly. Brenda would just lie, and David would stand there, wringing his hands and talking about misunderstandings. I needed to be smarter. I needed to play their game. 2 days later, Brenda called. Good news, Carol, she chirped. I found a wonderful local handyman, a guy named Rick. He's going to come by tomorrow to take a look at that guest bathroom upstairs. I told him the grout looked a little old, and I want to make sure everything is perfect for Mom. She didn't ask. She told me. A strange man was coming into my house tomorrow. A man I didn't know, hired by her. What time, Brenda? I asked, my voice as sweet as I could make it. The next morning, Rick arrived. He was a shifty-eyed man with a greasy ponytail and a tool belt that looked like it had never seen a hard day's work. Brenda was with him, of course, directing him as if she were the lady of the manor. I stayed in the kitchen, nursing a cup of coffee, listening. After about 20 minutes of clanging and banging upstairs, they came down. Rick had a solemn look on his face. Brenda looked concerned, a practiced, theatrical expression. Ma'am, Rick said, wiping his hands on a dirty rag. You've got a serious problem up there. There's a hairline crack in the main soil pipe under the floorboards. It's a slow leak right now, but it's been rotting out the subfloor. It's a miracle it hasn't collapsed. It's a big job. We're talking about tearing out the whole floor. It's gonna run you, I'd say, around $8,000, maybe $9,000. I felt the air leave my lungs. $9,000. It was a staggering amount. Brenda immediately put her arm around my shoulder. Oh, Carol, don't you worry, she said, her voice full of false sympathy. This is actually a blessing in disguise. We can get this fixed right away. In fact, it would be much easier if Mom just moved in now. She can oversee the work while you're out, make sure these guys do it right. It takes the pressure right off you. It was all so perfect. Too perfect. A sudden catastrophic repair that required her mother's immediate presence. My internal alarm bells weren't just ringing. They were screaming. I looked at Rick's shifty eyes and Brenda's predatory smile, and I saw the whole disgusting play laid out before me. Thank you for your assessment, Rick, I said, my voice steady. And thank you for your concern, Brenda. Let me think about it. I'll need to look at my finances. As soon as they left, I went straight to the phone. I didn't call a random plumber from the internet. I called Bill, a semi-retired plumber who had been married to my best friend, Mary, for 50 years before she passed. He was an honest, no-nonsense man who had known me for decades. "Bill, it's Carol Peters," I said when he answered. "I know you're mostly retired, but I have a situation here, and you're the only person I trust." He was at my house within the hour. I explained what Rick had said and Bill just grunted. He went upstairs and I could hear him moving around quietly, his work methodical and sure. After about 30 minutes he came back down, his face grim. He was holding a small adjustable wrench. "Carol," he said, his voice low and serious, "there's no crack in your soil pipe. The pipe is old but it's cast iron. It'll outlast both of us. There is, however, a small leak." He held up the wrench. "This leak is coming from the supply line to the toilet. And it's leaking because this compression nut," he pointed to the end of the wrench, "was deliberately loosened. Maybe a quarter turn. Just enough to create a slow drip that would eventually stain the ceiling below, but not enough to be obvious right away." He looked me straight in the eye, and the kindness in his face was almost enough to make me break down. "Carol, I've been doing this for 50 years. This wasn't a loose nut from vibration. This wasn't old age. Somebody came in here and did this on purpose. They sabotaged your plumbing." I sank into a kitchen chair, the floral pattern of the cushion seeming to mock the ugliness of the situation. They hadn't just lied. They hadn't just committed fraud. They had actively damaged my home, my sanctuary, in an effort to force me out, to make me feel helpless and incompetent. This wasn't about finding a convenient place for Martha to live anymore. This was about power. And they had just shown me, in the clearest terms possible, that there was no line they wouldn't cross to get it. The war had begun whether I wanted it or not. The knowledge that they had deliberately damaged my home settled in my soul like a block of ice. I had Bill tighten the nut, and the leak stopped instantly. The only evidence left was a small damp spot on the plywood, and the cold fury burning in my heart. I knew I couldn't let them know I was onto them. Not yet. I had to let them think their plan was working. So when Brenda called a few days later, her voice bright and cheerful, to invite me over for a family dinner, I accepted. "That sounds lovely, dear," I said, my voice dripping with the fake sweetness I was learning to perfect. Their house was everything mine wasn't. It was large, cold, and minimalist, decorated in shades of gray and white. It felt less like a home and more like a showroom. The air was thick with a tense, artificial pleasantness. David greeted me at the door with a hug that felt more like a formality than an act of affection. We sat down to dinner, and I was uncomfortably aware of the laptop set up at the end of the table. On the screen were the smiling faces of Brenda's two sisters, joining via Zoom. The whole clan was assembled. It felt like I was the guest of honor at my own execution. They made small talk through the meal, asking about my garden, complimenting the salad I'd brought. All the while I could feel their eyes on me, watching, assessing. Then, as David was clearing the main course plates, Brenda stood up. She tapped her wine glass with a fork, the sharp ping silencing the room. "I just want to take a moment," she began, her voice ringing with performative emotion, "to say how truly blessed we all are. It's not every family that gets the opportunity to come together like this, to support each other." She smiled, a wide, practiced smile that didn't reach her cold eyes. "As you all know, Mom has been looking to make a change, and Carol has been so incredibly generous." She turned her smile on me, and it felt like a spotlight in an interrogation room. "So, I'm thrilled to officially announce to the whole family that Mom will be moving in with Carol at her beautiful Lakeside cottage. We're creating a wonderful multi-generational home where we can all be there for each other." On the laptop screen, her sisters erupted in applause. "Oh, that's wonderful news," one of them gushed. "Martha, you must be so thrilled." I glanced at my son. David was standing by the counter, his back to me, scraping plates. He didn't turn around. He didn't say a word. He just kept scraping, the sound of the fork against the ceramic grating on my nerves. He was a coward, hiding behind a stack of dirty dishes while his wife publicly dismantled my life. Brenda continued, her voice gaining momentum. "It's the perfect solution. Carol will have company, and Mom will have the peace and quiet of the lake. We've already hired a contractor to start some minor renovations next month to make the bathroom more accessible for Mom, and we'll be moving her things in over the next few weeks. She was speaking indefinites. Hired a contractor. Next month. Not we hope, or we're thinking about. It was a done deal, announced to her entire family as a fact. She had orchestrated this entire dinner, this entire performance to corner me, to make it impossible for me to back out without looking like a cruel, ungrateful old woman in front of everyone. I just sat there, a small polite smile frozen on my face. I looked at the beaming faces on the screen, at Brenda's triumphant expression, at my son's rigid back. They thought they had won. They thought their public ambush had sealed my fate. They mistook my silence for submission. But as I sat there nodding along, I wasn't submitting. I was gathering intelligence. I was memorizing every smug smile, every confident word. I was fueling the fire. And inside, where they couldn't see, a plan was beginning to take shape. A plan that would turn their victory celebration into a funeral. I just needed one more piece of evidence, one final undeniable nail to seal their coffin. I drove home from that dinner with a clarity that was as sharp and cold as a shard of glass. The performance was over. The battle lines were drawn. I spent the next few days in a state of tense quiet, waiting for their next move, while secretly making my own. I called my lawyer. Her name was Jessica, a sharp, no-nonsense woman I'd known from a charity board years ago. I laid out the whole story for her over the phone. The key, the mail fraud, the sabotaged plumbing. She listened patiently, the only sound on her end the occasional scratch of a pen. "Okay, Carol," she said when I finished. "This is bad. The mail forwarding is a federal offense, and the sabotage is criminal damage. But right now it's your word against theirs. We need something concrete. Something undeniable that shows their intent." I told her I would be vigilant. And I didn't have to wait long. The very next evening my phone buzzed with a text message. It was from my neighbor Sharon, a lovely woman who lived 2 houses down. Sharon was a retired schoolteacher and, thankfully, very tech-savvy. Her text was short and frantic. "Carol, you need to see this now. Check the neighborhood Facebook group." My hands trembled as I opened the app. Our community had a private group, a place where people posted about lost dogs and upcoming potlucks. And there, at the very top of the feed, was a post from Brenda. My blood ran cold as I read it. It was a long, rambling post, written in a tone of deep, feigned concern. She started by saying how much she loved her wonderful mother-in-law, Carol, but that she had become increasingly worried about me. She wrote, "Living all alone out by the lake, I've noticed she's getting more and more forgetful. Just last week, she couldn't remember where she put her glasses, and she left the stove on after making tea. I'm worried she's becoming a danger to herself." Lies. All of it blatant, vicious lies. I had never been more sharp or clear-headed in my life. The post continued, "That's why our family has made the difficult but necessary decision for my mother, Martha, to move in with her. Martha is still sharp as a tack and can provide the gentle day-to-day supervision Carol needs. It's crucial that someone is there to help manage her finances and make sure her bills are paid on time. We're doing this for her own good, to ensure her safety and protect her assets in her golden years." Protect her assets. My assets. My home. My inheritance. I felt sick. She was painting a picture of me as a senile, incompetent old woman who needed to be managed. She was preemptively justifying her takeover to the entire neighborhood, trying to poison the well so that if I fought back, I would look like a confused old woman lashing out. She was trying to strip me of my credibility, my agency, my very mind. But then I saw it. At the top of the post, next to Brenda's name, was the small icon of a globe. She had meant to post it privately, or perhaps only to a select group of friends. But in her haste and her arrogance, she had made a critical mistake. She had posted it publicly. My fingers flew across the screen. Screenshot. Then another. And another. I captured the entire post, and the few supportive comments from her friends that had already started to trickle in. Just as I saved the last one, I refreshed the page. The post was gone. She had realized her mistake and deleted it. But it was too late. I had it. I had the undeniable proof Jessica said I needed. I immediately forwarded the screenshots to my neighbor, Sharon, with the message, "Thank you. You are a lifesaver." Her reply came back instantly. "I have your back, Carol. This is monstrous." Then I opened my email, attached the images, and sent them to my lawyer with a single sentence. Is this concrete enough for you? This was no longer just a family dispute. Brenda had publicly defamed me. She had laid out her entire predatory plan for the world to see, all in a desperate attempt to legitimize the theft of my life. She thought she had erased her mistake, but she had no idea that she had just handed me the weapon I needed to burn her entire world to the ground. Jessica called me less than 5 minutes after I sent the email. There was no preamble. "Carol, this is it," she said, her voice sharp and clear. "This is the smoking gun. It shows clear intent to defraud and to establish a false narrative to gain control of your assets. We have them. Now here is exactly what you are going to do." For the first time in weeks, the fog of anxiety and fear began to lift, replaced by a cold, clear sense of purpose. I listened to Jessica's instructions, writing everything down on a legal pad. The plan was simple, direct, and devastating. My first call was to a 24-hour locksmith. I explained that I had a security concern and needed an immediate, full lock change on all exterior doors. The man who answered had a gruff but reassuring voice. "I'll have my best guy, Tom, out there in an hour," he said. While I waited, I moved on to step 2. I went online and ordered 3 high-resolution security cameras, a small one disguised as a birdhouse for the front porch, and 2 more discreet dome cameras for the back door and the garage. I paid for expedited shipping. They would be here in 2 days. Next, I logged into the control panel for my garage door opener. I found the section for access codes and saw the one Brenda had set for herself, 1-3-4. The simplicity of it was almost insulting. I deleted it and the guest code David had and set a new complex one. I felt a small vicious thrill as I clicked save. 1 more door slammed shut. Exactly 1 hour later, a van pulled into my driveway. Tom the locksmith was a big, quiet man with gentle hands. He worked efficiently, drilling out the old locks and replacing them with heavy-duty, high-security deadbolts. He handed me a small sealed plastic bag containing 3 keys. "These are special, ma'am," he explained. "They're patented. Can't be copied at a hardware store. Only I can make a duplicate, and only with your ID and a password." "Perfect," I said, the word tasting like victory. I paid him in cash, adding a generous tip. As he drove away, I took the old locks, still attached to their metal plates, and dropped them into the bottom of my garbage can with a satisfying thud. That evening, I sat at my kitchen table and executed the next part of Jessica's plan. I wrote a formal letter. It was addressed to Brenda and David. The language was cold, legal, and precise. "To whom it may concern," it began. "This letter serves as a formal notice of trespass. You are hereby forbidden from entering the property at 125 Lakeside Drive, Blue Ridge, North Carolina, or my person at any time. Any attempt to do so will be met with immediate legal action, and law enforcement will be contacted." I didn't mention the mail, the plumber, or the Facebook post. Jessica had been very clear about that. "Don't show your hand," she'd said. "Just put up the legal wall. Let them wonder what you know." I printed 2 copies, put them in separate envelopes, and drove to the post office the next morning to send them via certified mail with return receipt requested. They would have to sign for them. There would be no denying they had received the warning. Over the next 2 days, my cameras arrived. I'd never been particularly handy, but fear is a powerful motivator. I spent an entire afternoon on a stepladder, following YouTube tutorials, drilling small holes and running wires. By the time I was done, my little cottage was a fortress. The cameras were linked to my phone. I could see every angle of my property with a swipe of my finger. I felt a profound sense of control I hadn't felt in weeks. I wasn't a victim waiting for the next attack. I was a strategist, a general preparing her battlefield. I had changed the locks, secured the perimeter, and sent the official declaration of war. My fortress was ready. My evidence was collected. The trap was set. All I had to do now was wait for the enemy to walk into it. And I had a feeling I wouldn't have to wait very long. The certified mail receipts came back signed. A tense, electric silence followed for 3 days. I imagined the scene in their cold, gray house, the confusion, the indignation, the dawning horror that their soft, pliable mother-in-law had suddenly developed a spine of steel. The silence was finally broken by a single text from David. "Mom, we need to talk. Brenda is very upset." I typed back one single word. "No." And then this morning, the U-Haul arrived, just as I knew it would. They had received my legal warning, my formal notice of trespass, and they had chosen to ignore it completely. They believed I was bluffing. They believed they could still bully their way in. So there I stood, watching Brenda's face contort with rage as she rattled the unmoving doorknob. She finally gave up and started pounding on the door with her fist. "Carol, I know you're in there. Open this door right now. What is the meaning of this?" David was hovering behind her, looking pale and useless. "Mom, please," he called out weakly. "Let's just talk about this." That's when the second vehicle I was expecting pulled quietly into my driveway. It wasn't a moving van. It was a patrol car from the county sheriff's office. I had called them an hour earlier. I explained to the dispatcher that I was a senior citizen living alone, that I had sent a formal trespass notice to family members, and that I had reason to believe they were going to ignore it and cause a scene. I requested a civil standby, not to arrest anyone, but simply to have an officer present to keep the peace. A tall, calm-looking deputy stepped out of the car. He adjusted his belt and walked slowly toward the porch. "Folks," he said, his voice deep and even. "Is there a problem here?" Brenda spun around, her face flushed. "Officer, thank God. This is my mother-in-law's house. We're here to help her move my mother in, and she's locked us out. I think she's having some kind of episode. She's elderly, you know." The deputy looked from her frantic face to the locked door, his expression unreadable. "Ma'am, is this your property?" he asked Brenda. "Well, no, it's my mother-in-law's, but—" "Then you need to calm down," he said, cutting her off. He turned and knocked firmly on my door. "Ma'am? This is Deputy Miller. Would you mind stepping outside for a moment?" This was it. The moment of truth. I took a deep breath, unlocked the deadbolt, and opened the door. I didn't look at Brenda or David. I looked directly at the deputy. In my hands I held a simple cardboard box. "Good morning, officer," I said calmly. "Thank you for coming. I believe these people are trespassing." Brenda let out a gasp of outrage. "Trespassing? We're her family." I ignored her. I stepped out onto the porch and held the box out to Brenda. She stared at it, confused. "What is this?" she snapped. "It's yours," I said softly. The deputy watched, silent and observant. Brenda snatched the box from my hands and looked inside. Her face, which had been a mask of righteous anger, began to crumble. On the very top of the pile was the crisp, black and white printout of her Facebook post. I saw her eyes scan the words. "Getting more and more forgetful. Manage her finances. For her own good." Beneath that was the invoice from the fake plumber, Rick, with a note from the real plumber, Bill, stapled to it, stating that the leak had been deliberately caused. And under that, tucked neatly in a row, were the 3 envelopes from the Social Security Administration, all addressed to Martha Jennings at my address. The evidence of federal mail fraud. I watched as every ounce of color drained from her face. The fight, the arrogance, the righteous fury. It all evaporated, replaced by the stark, cold terror of being caught. She looked up from the box, her eyes wide with panic, and finally she looked truly at me. She didn't see a confused old woman anymore. She saw the person who held her future in a cardboard box. David just stood there, his mouth hanging open, looking from the box to my face, the pieces finally clicking into place in his slow, cowardly mind. The deputy, seeing it all, finally spoke. "Ma'am," he said to Brenda, his voice leaving no room for argument, "I think you and your husband need to get in your vehicle and leave this property. Now." Brenda didn't say a word. She just clutched the box to her chest like a shield. David, finally spurred into action, scurried over to her and gently guided her off the porch. They got into their car, leaving the U-Haul and their suitcases sitting in my driveway like monuments to their failure. I watched them drive away until their car was just a speck down the road. I turned to the deputy. "Thank you, Officer Miller," I said, my voice thick with emotion. He just tipped his hat. "You have a good day now, ma'am," he said, and got back in his car. I walked back inside my quiet, empty, safe house. I closed my new solid door. And as I turned the deadbolt, the sharp, definitive click was the sweetest sound I had ever heard. It was the sound of freedom. The sound of victory. The victory was sweet, but I knew it wasn't the end. People like Brenda don't accept defeat gracefully. They lash out. They seek revenge. I spent the next 2 days in a state of hypervigilance, my phone always within reach, the security camera feed always open on my tablet. The U-Haul company came and collected their abandoned truck. Silence returned to the lake, but it was a tense, waiting silence. The retaliation when it came was worse than I could have imagined. It was a quiet knock on my door on a Tuesday afternoon. I looked through the peephole and saw a woman I didn't recognize. She was middle-aged, with a kind face and a professional-looking blazer, holding a clipboard. I opened the door cautiously. "Mrs. Carol Peters?" she asked, her voice gentle. "Yes." She held up an ID badge. "My name is Sarah Jenkins. I'm with the County Adult Protective Services." My heart plummeted into my stomach. APS. The words alone were enough to strike fear into any senior citizen. It was the nuclear option, a weapon designed to strip you of your dignity and your independence. "May I come in?" she asked politely. I felt a wave of dizziness, but I forced myself to stand tall. I knew this was Brenda's work. This was her cowardly, vicious revenge. I stepped aside and let the woman into my home, my sanctuary, which now felt like it was being invaded all over again, this time by the state itself. Ms. Jenkins was professional and respectful, but the nature of her visit was inherently humiliating. She explained that their office had received an anonymous but highly detailed report. The report claimed I was suffering from severe cognitive decline. It alleged that I was living in self-neglect, that my house was unsanitary, that I wasn't eating properly, and that I had recently exhibited paranoid, aggressive behavior towards family members who were only trying to help me. Every word was a poison dart, a carefully crafted lie designed to paint me as the crazy old woman Brenda had described in her Facebook post. I had to sit there in my own clean, well-kept living room and listen to this stranger repeat these vile accusations. Then came the inspection. It was the single most degrading experience of my life. With my permission, which I knew I couldn't really refuse, she walked through my home. She opened my refrigerator to check for fresh food. She inspected my bathroom for cleanliness. She looked in my bedroom to see if the bed was made. I felt like a bug under a microscope, my entire life being judged and assessed. She asked me questions. What day was it? Who was the current president? She asked about my finances, my doctors, my medications. I answered every question calmly and clearly, my mind racing. This was exactly what Brenda wanted. To bury me in a bureaucratic nightmare. To use the very system designed to protect people like me as a weapon against me. I could see the confusion on Ms. Jenkins' face. The house was spotless. The fridge was full. I was lucid and articulate. The reality she was witnessing did not match the horror story she had been told. When the inspection was over, we sat back down at my kitchen table. "Mrs. Peters," she said, her kind face now etched with concern. "The report we received is not consistent with what I'm seeing here. But it was very specific. The caller mentioned you had recently changed your locks and installed security cameras, claiming it was evidence of severe paranoia." I looked at her and for the first time, I let the raw, honest anger show on my face. "Ms. Jenkins," I said, my voice shaking slightly, "I didn't change the locks because I'm paranoid. I changed them because my daughter-in-law made a copy without my permission and was planning to move her mother into my home against my will. I didn't install cameras because I'm seeing things. I installed them because my plumbing was deliberately sabotaged to force me into expensive repairs." I stood up, walked over to my desk and came back with a folder. I laid it on the table between us. Inside was a copy of the trespass notice, the certified mail receipts, a sworn statement from Bill the plumber, and the beautiful full-color printout of Brenda's Facebook post. "The person who called you," I said, my voice now as hard as steel, "is the same person who wrote this post, telling the entire neighborhood I was incompetent so she could protect my assets. She called you not because she is concerned for my welfare, but because I stopped her from stealing my home. This isn't a welfare check, Ms. Jenkins. This is witness intimidation." She picked up the Facebook post, her eyes widening as she read. She looked at the plumber's statement, her lips a thin, hard line. She spent 10 minutes reading everything in my folder. When she was done, she closed it and looked at me. Her expression completely changed. The professional pity was gone, replaced by a cold, simmering anger. "Mrs. Peters," she said slowly, "filing a false report with APS is a serious crime." She stood up and handed me her card. Our investigation is now closed. But if you and your lawyer decide to press charges for this, I will be available to testify. But as she left, the relief I expected didn't come. All I felt was the lingering stain of the humiliation. Brenda hadn't won, but she had managed to wound me. She had used a system of trust to violate my home in the most intimate way possible. And that was a wound that would take a long time to heal. The APS ordeal left me shaken, but also resolute. Brenda had crossed the final line. This was no longer just about protecting my home. It was about protecting my name, my sanity, and my right to live my life without being harassed and terrorized. That night I called Sharon, my neighbor. My voice was trembling as I told her what had happened. There was a long silence on the other end of the line, and then she spoke, her voice filled with a fury that matched my own. "That's it, Carol," she said. "That absolute monster. She can't be allowed to get away with this." I didn't ask her to do anything, but I knew Sharon. She was a retired teacher. A woman who had spent her life fighting for children and standing up to bullies. The next morning, I woke up to a flurry of text messages. Sharon had taken action. She had gone onto a much larger regional community forum, a website with thousands of members across several counties. And she had posted the story. She did it anonymously, never using my name or Brenda's. She just laid out the facts clinically and precisely. She titled the post, "A Warning to Seniors: How a Concerned Family Member Can Weaponize the System." She wrote about an unnamed widow who bought her dream retirement home. She wrote about the copied key, the fraudulent mail forwarding, the sabotaged plumbing. She wrote about the trespass notice. And then she wrote about the retaliatory false report to Adult Protective Services. She finished the post by uploading the redacted screenshot of Brenda's Facebook post, with the names blacked out, but the vicious words there for all to see. The post exploded. Within an hour there were 100 comments. By noon there were over 1,000. The story struck a raw, exposed nerve. People started sharing their own stories. A woman whose brother tried to have her declared incompetent to get control of their parents' inheritance. A man whose children tried to force him into a nursing home so they could sell his farm. It was a flood of pain and outrage. A chorus of voices who had been silenced, bullied, and betrayed by the people who were supposed to love them most. The story was shared to other groups. A lawyer from a nearby town commented, offering free legal advice to the anonymous homeowner. A local news reporter sent Sharon a private message, asking for an interview. My personal private nightmare had become a public rallying cry. Around 3 o'clock that afternoon my phone rang. It was David. I almost didn't answer, but I knew I had to one last time. "Mom," he said, his voice strained and tired. "My phone has been blowing up all day. People are sending me a link to some crazy story online. It's about you, isn't it?" "I don't know what you're talking about, David," I said, my voice flat. "Don't lie to me," he snapped, and for the first time I heard real anger in his voice. Not at his wife, but at me. "Brenda is a wreck. Her boss saw the post. Her friends are calling her. You're ruining her life." I waited. I waited for the words I had been longing to hear for weeks. I waited for an apology. For a sign of remorse. For him to say, "Mom, I'm so sorry. I should have stopped her." It never came. Instead, he took a deep, shaky breath and said, "Look, Brenda is she's under a lot of stress right now. This whole thing has been really hard on her." And that was it. That was the moment. The last flickering ember of hope I had for my son died out. He wasn't a victim of his wife's manipulation. He was her accomplice. Her enabler. Even now, after all she had done, the lies, the fraud, the sabotage, the public defamation, the false APS report, his primary concern was his wife's stress. I didn't yell. I didn't cry. I just felt a profound, quiet calm settle over me. "I see," I said softly. "Well, I hope things get less stressful for her soon. Goodbye, David." I hung up the phone before he could reply. I blocked his number. Then I blocked Brenda's. I sat there in the silence of my kitchen and grieved. I grieved for the little boy who used to hold my hand. I grieved for the young man I had sacrificed everything for. I grieved for the son I had loved so much, the son who I finally had to admit was gone forever. And then when the tears were done, I felt something new. It was a feeling of lightness. The burden of hoping he would change. The weight of waiting for an apology that would never come was finally lifted. I was free. It's been 6 months since that last phone call. The silence is no longer tense. It is peaceful. I wake up in the morning not to an alarm clock, but to the gentle sound of birds singing in the trees outside my window. The air smells of pine needles and damp earth. My life has found a new quiet rhythm. The first thing I do is make coffee. Just 1 cup in my favorite chipped mug. I don't rush it. I take it out to the screened-in porch and watch the sun rise over the lake, painting the still water in shades of pink and gold. The world feels new every morning. The guest room, the one Brenda had so confidently claimed for her mother, is a guest room no more. I sold the bed frame and dresser online. I donated the mattress. The room is now my art studio. An easel stands by the window where the light is best. Canvases are stacked against the wall, and the air smells of turpentine and oil paint. I hadn't painted since before my husband passed away, but my hands remembered. I'm not a master, not by any means. But I spend hours in there, losing myself in color and shape, reclaiming a part of myself I thought was lost forever. My neighbor Sharon and I have become the best of friends. We have coffee on my porch twice a week. We garden together. She helped me set up a small website where I can sell some of my paintings. I'm not making a fortune, but every time someone buys a small landscape of the lake, it feels like a quiet validation. A reminder that it's never too late to create something beautiful out of your life. The most significant change, however, happened in my lawyer's office about 2 months ago. Jessica had already sent a cease and desist letter to Brenda and David that was so terrifyingly official they wouldn't dare bother me again. But I had one last piece of business. I need to update my will, I told her. We sat together and drafted a new one. David's name, which had once been the sole beneficiary of my entire estate, was removed. There was no grand, angry statement. His name was just gone. It was a quiet, legal acknowledgement of a truth my heart had already accepted. In its place, we did something new. I used the entirety of my estate, the house, my savings, my retirement accounts, to create a legal trust. I called it the Carol Peters Foundation for Senior Advocacy. Its sole purpose is to provide grants and funding for legal aid services that specialize in helping seniors who are victims of family-related financial exploitation and inheritance theft. It will help other men and women who find themselves in the same nightmare I did, who need a lawyer but can't afford one. When I signed the final document, Jessica smiled at me. "You know, Carol," she said, "in a way Brenda gave you a gift." I must have looked at her like she was crazy. "She pushed you so far," Jessica explained, "that you were forced to find a strength you never knew you had. And now you're going to use that strength to help hundreds, maybe thousands of other people. Your legacy won't just be this house. It will be a shield for others." She was right. I walked out of her office that day feeling taller, lighter. The pain they had caused me hadn't been erased, but it had been transformed. It was no longer just a scar. It was the foundation of a new purpose. I don't know what happened to Brenda and David. I hear whispers through the grapevine that they moved out of state, that her reputation in the community was ruined after the story went viral. I don't know, and I find that I don't care. Their story is over for me. Mine is just beginning. I sit here now on my porch, a half-finished painting of the sunset drying in my studio. The house behind me is silent and safe. The lake before me is calm and clear. My life is finally completely my own. The locks on my doors aren't there to keep my family out. They are there to keep my peace in. Thank you all so much for listening to my story. It wasn't easy to share, but I felt it was important. My question for you all is this. Have you ever had to draw a hard line with a family member to protect your own peace? Let me know your story in the comments below. Your experiences matter, and sharing them gives strength to others. And if my story resonated with you, please consider giving it a like and subscribing for more. You are not alone.